Chapter 1. 1 month to most. A month meant little beyond the time separating them from one end of the month to the other. To me, it was the difference between the life I had known and the life I was starting to live. It was all that divided me from being aware of the dangerous world I was part of and actually feeling firsthand the dangerous world I lived in. A month had passed since I had killed to protect Daniel and my family. A month had passed since I had learned my blood was special and could turn people into a demon called a Night Stalker. It was all that separated me from the knowledge that I was hunted, that I was different in ways that made me even more hunted than your typical human-angel hybrid known as a watcher. My blood pounded now. It coursed through my veins, filling my ears with the sound of its pulsing beat. Sweat poured down my face and back in conjunction with the all-encompassing beat, as my feet created a steady rhythm on the hard ground. I increased my pace, loving the way the beating of my heart erased all thought and the fleeting freedom of my run. The summer sun stretched high in the sky as I raced towards it, the morning dawning fast with the brightness of the season. I lowered my head and increased my pace even more, trying to catch up to the sun, knowing it was impossible. When I ran, I felt in control of my life, proactive, not like I was waiting around for the unknown to catch up to me. There was a profound freedom in the act. My feet were tools of change, of forward motion that could not be stopped. It was the only form of running I allowed myself anymore. I was so intent on the feeling of my feet on the pavement and the heat on my skin that I didn't notice I was being followed. I should have noticed. It should have been the first thing that registered to my senses. I had become paranoid over my month of waiting. It was hard not to. When two ridiculously evil seekers try to kill you, and a sheriff of the sleepy community you live in tries to get your blood to start a new dawn for humankind, it puts you on edge. Still, it wasn't until I crested the hill of my high school that I recognized the threat. Even though the normally quiet streets were full of tourists flocking to the tiny hamlet of King's Cross to partake in the outdoor recreation scene and the nostalgia of a simpler way of living, there was no excuse for not noticing. A hand touched my shoulder at the top of the hill, startling me. You were dead. I spun around at the touch, my heart pounding harder from the fear. Daniel, his green eyes sparkling in the sun, his black hair messy, stopped running as well. He was wearing jogging clothes and, from the sweat on his face, appeared to have been following me for a while. I feel awfully alive to be dead, I said, trying to hide my fear. If I were a seeker, you'd be dead, he corrected. But you are not. So I'm not. I thought you were going to tell me when you go on runs, he said. And I didn't think I needed a babysitter. I'm not trying to babysit you. I'm trying to keep you alive, he said. I put my hands on my hips. I know you are, I said in contrast to my combative stance. Then why do you keep going on runs without telling me? Because I'm 16, I said. That's no excuse, especially for you, he said. The truth was, I never planned my runs. When the dark thoughts of guilt and fear started to get too overwhelming, I ran. Sometimes I ran twice a day. Sometimes I didn't run at all. I sound ridiculous, don't I? Daniel asked, over the excuse I was forming. He could probably sense my reason. His eyes told me he did. He had been there. He had killed. He had taken lives he regretted and knew that the ways we dealt with those consequences didn't always make the most sense. You are worried, I said. I am too. He shrugged one of his shoulders in a question. I wasn't sure what he was really questioning. Are you finished? Nope. I'll race you to Robbie's grocery, I said. That's 3 miles. You tired or something? I asked him. Daniel's competitive smirk erased the tension between us. He took off down the street without warning, and I raced on his heels, trying to catch up. As we ran, the thoughts I'd been hearing, a gift I'd had for a while now, because of the curse of my existence, faded into silence. I knew Daniel was protecting me from the masses. Normally, I would have complained, wanting to block out the thoughts myself, but I was eager for the silence today. It was very much needed after the lonely night I had spent in worry. Daniel's long legs ate up the hilly streets with unrelenting grace as I chased after him. The last quarter mile, I put on an extra spurt of speed to try and pass him, but he kept moving in front of me, blocking my attempts. I kept trying to shove him to make him trip, but he just danced out of the way of my attempts, maintaining his lead. He won, but only by a little. Not bad, he said, as we stopped. I lost, I panted. Yes, you did, he said happily. I made a face and tried to catch my breath. He was breathing heavier than normal, but nowhere near my level of panting. It was another gift watchers had, the gift of extended lung capacity, a gift I had yet to inherit. We started walking to my house, the hot sun pounding into my skin. Daniel's presence took away some of the dark thoughts away. More than this run, though, I was suspicious of his appearance. I didn't think I was going to see you today, I said. I thought you were helping Beatrice with a mystery errand. I wanted to see you, he said. Uh-huh, he protested. I'm sure it was just coincidence that you showed up right when I was going on a run and that you were prepared for that run. I gestured to his exercise clothes. I'm sticking to my story, he said. Of course you are. Has Beatrice and Han figured out anything? They had been testing my blood to figure out how I could do the things I could do. So far, all they had determined was I had the same blood type as Ellen. No. He stepped in front of me. I stopped walking and met his eyes. Do you want to go on a date with me tonight? He asked. A date? That's when two people partake in an activity together, which is generally considered fun, he said. So when you and Jackson do something that you have fun doing, you are actually on a date? I asked. Maybe my definition needs work, he admitted ruefully. Definitely, I said. So? A date sounds great, I said. What do you want to do? We could go see a movie, something with gratuitous violence, ridiculous scripting, and bad acting, so I can laugh. Philistine, he accused. No, I'm American. He laughed. A movie it is, then. He stepped out of my way, and we started walking again. The sidewalk took us back through the small downtown of King's Cross and away from the farmland Robbie's grocery was surrounded by. We passed the high school again and the many quaint shops aimed at tourists. As I passed an antique store, I saw a small flyer hanging in the window and stopped walking. The sick feeling in my stomach was instantaneous. What's the matter? Daniel asked, also stopping. I pointed at the flyer. On the front was Sheriff Cobb's face. He was holding his granddaughter and looking at the camera with a smile. His brown eyes that had looked at me in my darkest moment, were full of purpose. There was a phone number and the words, "Missing. Please call with any information." I knew exactly what had happened to him. He had tried to kill Daniel, and I had killed him in response. We had burned his body along with the seekers he had under his control. But I couldn't call that number and let Cobb's family know the truth. It would just get me locked up in a padded room. His family didn't deserve the questions, though. It was unfair they had to spend the rest of their days wondering about someone they loved. It was also a reminder of my month spent thinking about the people I had killed. All I wanted to do was find the nearest phone and call the number on the flyer. I wanted to tell them the truth, to get the feeling of guilt off my chest. Contrarily, the thought made me feel sick to the stomach. Daniel touched me on my shoulder, his touch telling me there was nothing I could do. I sighed and turned away from the flyer. He was right. There was nothing either of us could do to change the past. The past was done. What did you help Beatrice with? I asked, to clear the thoughts of Cobb from my mind. An experiment, he said. Vague, simple, beautifully obscure, a lie. What kind of experiment? I asked. Daniel looked out at the street, and his eyebrows narrowed in thought. He didn't answer. It didn't have anything to do with proving I'm right about water being bulletproof. I joked lightly to get him talking. He fixed his expression by smiling slightly. Nope. Pity. I was well aware he was keeping something from me. The lie bothered me, but I wasn't in the mood for arguing. I would press him when I wasn't drenched in sweat, tired from a night on my window seat, fighting sleep, so I wouldn't have the usual nightmares, and, of course, when I wasn't fighting the guilt from that damned flyer. We kept walking, our unspoken words slowly filling the space between us. The narrow streets near my house were filled with sounds. Lawnmowers threw grass in the air as people wandered around their yards, pruning hedges and watering rose bushes, searching for something to do on a muggy Saturday. Kids ran around in their yards and raced past us on their bicycles. My house remained unchanged and unchangeable as it sat at the end of its dead-end road. It was lofty and large against the more common-looking houses surrounding it. Daniel's black Audi was parked behind Ellen's station wagon. 2 motorcycles, which belonged to Jackson and Margaret, were in our driveway. The day was peaceful and perfect. The community was in full sleepy mode. It was something I would have never thought I could enjoy before moving to King's Cross. Enjoying the sights of the bright flowers and cozy atmosphere. I walked across my short lawn, Daniel trailing after me in thoughtful silence, In the foyer, I was greeted by something more alarming than my guilty thoughts. I stopped walking and stared in confusion and slight fear that one of the people I loved most in the world had lost her mind. Ellen was in the middle of the living room, standing on her head. She had her eyes closed as her feet reached for the ceiling. Every couple of seconds she would let out a loud breath, followed by in the background. Strange music, full of birds and flutes, accompanied her chant. "What on earth are you doing?" I asked her as Daniel shut the door behind us. Her eyes popped open, and her body wobbled. With a squeak, she toppled to her right and hit the floor. The whole house rattled with her fall. Laughing, I helped her up. "Have you gone crazy?" "No, I've gone yoga. Sam bought me a book," she said. "That explains a lot," I said. Ellen was a fan of new hobbies and skills. I usually joined her in her new hobbies, but I had been distracted lately. I felt a pang of regret she was practicing without me, but was glad to see her so normal and Ellen-like, especially after the lockdown we had all been under while we, Daniel, searched for answers. "I was doing fine until you walked in," she laughed as she dusted off the remainder of her ruined dignity. "Is standing on your head part of yoga?" I asked, picking up the book she was referencing. I flipped through the pages curiously, seeing lots of positions I could never fold myself into. "I skipped to the back," she confessed. "Sounds like you," I said. "Hey, Daniel," Ellen said, smiling warmly at him. "Hello." "Are you here to stay for a while?" she asked. Daniel had been staying with us off and on for the last month to guard us from any watchers that Marcus, the leader of the Seekers, and an all-around bad guy might send. He was relegated to the ground floor at night, not that he stayed relegated. When he wasn't staying with us, Jackson and Margaret were. I was tired of having bodyguards around all the time. Not that I minded Daniel's company. He made me feel normal, and his banter kept me laughing. It was the idea of constant protection and limited freedom I didn't like. Jackson and Margaret didn't help the feelings of wanting to be alone, though they were less restrictive of my movements. Making eye contact with Margaret was some sort of unspoken challenge. Unspoken being the operative word. Getting her to speak was like asking a mime for directions, painful and not the best of ideas. I liked Jackson well enough, when he wasn't making fun of me, at least. He knew how to laugh. Too, he didn't freak out when I went on runs. They both left me alone as long as I left them alone. But there was no denying their bodyguard status. They certainly weren't staying for fun, and made their dissatisfaction about their lack of privacy abundantly clear. They came down the stairs as we spoke. Jackson's blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail like normal, his square face illuminated by his usual mocking smile. He filled up the stairs, the sheer mass of his body urging the house to get out of his way to make room for him. He was the biggest person I had ever met, also the most gentle. Margaret was another story. Though no taller than me, her glare could fell empires, make men weep, and cause a lightning bolt to hit you mid-stride. Her face was neutral. However, as she walked behind Jackson, it was her default mode. Her beautiful black hair, for whatever reason, was in braids today. It made her look younger and more innocent. I wasn't deceived. It had to be a trick of some sort, a move to throw me off guard. "Thanks for keeping an eye on me for Claire," Daniel said sarcastically as Jackson reached the bottom stair. "You are welcome," Jackson replied, choosing to ignore Daniel's sarcasm. "Are you done with your errand?" Margaret asked from behind Jackson. "Yes." Daniel turned to Ellen to answer her question. "I'll be here. Beatrice only needed help for a couple of days." "Okay." "Oh, I'm going on a date with Sam tonight," Ellen said. "I don't want to be followed, so don't even think about it. I don't care if seekers attack us. I need some privacy or I will explode into tiny little atomic pieces." "All right." "I've got my own date to go to," Daniel said. Ellen nodded, then bent down to stand on her head again. I smiled at the sight and started up the stairs to shower off my run. Daniel pulled Margaret and Jackson into the kitchen as I walked up. Their conversation was quiet, but the tension of it permeated the house. I assumed it was about my run and its lack of supervision. When I was done with my shower, I went downstairs again. Margaret and Jackson were gone, probably happy they didn't have to hang around the house anymore. Ellen had finished her attempt at yoga and was talking with Daniel in the kitchen. When they saw me, their conversation trailed away. I could tell they had been talking about me, their words lingering in the hall, but Ellen switched her thoughts quickly. She smiled and put an arm around my waist, hugging me close. She has that look on her face again. I wish I could take it away. It makes her look so sad. Her thoughts reached out and brushed mine quietly. "How about you cook me lunch?" she asked cheerfully, masking her worry. "That sounds fun," I said dryly. "It does for me." I laughed and started pulling out things for a grilled cheese sandwich. "Alex is here," Daniel said, moving to help me with the food. "Good. She can help me pick out something to wear for tonight," Ellen said. "I don't know if she's going to feel like it," Daniel said. "Why?" Before he could answer, the front door creaked open and tired feet dragged along the wood floor in a very un-Alex way. Seconds later, Alex appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. Her normally happy face was etched with lines of sadness. Unlike Ellen, Alex worked hard to keep her thoughts scrambled, so the reason behind her sadness was obscured. She was getting better to the point where I couldn't hear her unless she let me. Her sadness was obvious, though no amount of thought scrambling could take away the expression on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. Alex sighed and sat down at our round kitchen table. "I just broke up with Davis." Davis and Alex had only been dating for a month, but Alex really liked him. He was polite and quiet and absolutely adored her. It was enough for any girl to want. "Why?" Ellen asked. Alex shrugged and looked down at the table. The tired lines grew more pronounced as she started tracing invisible lines on the table with her finger. "Alex, if you don't tell us, Ellen will mum it out of you," I said. "I will," Ellen agreed. "Then I'll Claire it out of you," I added. "She will," Ellen agreed again. "How are you supposed to date someone when you can't be honest with them?" Alex suddenly asked the room in a fit of irritation. "I mean, how? How do you have a real relationship when you can't tell the person you are with that you have the ability to turn into a demon? How do you go about mentioning that without putting him at risk? How does that even work? I can't be honest with him, ever. It's useless. Dating is useless." Daniel shifted uneasily next to me and turned to keep the bread from burning. He took the spatula from me and flipped the sandwich. His flip was deft and graceful, but the movement was rushed, awkward, so unlike him. It was strange, but I kept my attention on Alex. Her problem was the more immediate one. She shook her head in frustration as she continued speaking. Davis is great, but I can't lie anymore. He was upset about the breakup, too. I could see it. Alex shut her blue eyes that were capable of seeing straight into the heart of a person's motivation, eyes that saw more since I had given her my blood a month ago. Not only had I given her the ability to change into a Night Stalker, but other talents were starting to develop. She wasn't a watcher like Daniel, but she wasn't strictly human anymore. She was as much between worlds as I was. It was another thing I had placed on my things to feel guilty about list. This is my fault, I said. Alex rolled her eyes. God, if we have this conversation again, I'm going to scream. That would be loud, I said. Some things just aren't meant to be, Alex said. End of story. She turned to Ellen, her face purposefully transforming away from the sadness. You and Dad are going to dinner tonight, right? Yes, Ellen agreed. Alex grabbed Ellen's hand and stood. I sensed an epic distraction in the making, one that would keep her mind away from her breakup. Come on, let's find you something amazing to wear, she said to Ellen. Alex forced Ellen down the hall and up the stairs, their laughter and their conversation filling the house with sound. Daniel turned off the stove and put 3 sandwiches on a plate. He leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. I leaned next to him on the counter and mimicked his stance. Alex's breakup made me sad. I had loved seeing her in a normal relationship. It was proof that normal could exist in my world, as far as normal ever really was. I guess I'd better take this up to them, I said, gesturing at the food, knowing Ellen would forget to eat if I didn't take her food to her. I think I should shower. He glanced down at his sweaty clothes. Neither of us moved. Daniel stared at the floor, and I stared at the clock over the kitchen door. We both remained lost in separate, serious thoughts for a long moment. Then I closed the distance between us and put a hand on his cheek. I'm glad I don't have to lie to you. His eyes met mine, full of doubt. I'm glad. I'm just glad, I added. You shouldn't be. He realized I could hear his thoughts through our shared touch and cut me out abruptly. To cover for his hasty block, he kissed me on the neck. He started to leave the kitchen to take his shower, another distraction to get away from me. He paused at the door, his back to me. I promise to try my hardest to make sure you don't regret feeling that way. He stepped down the hall and up my stairs without another word. I picked up the sandwiches and followed him up, hearing him start the shower, and went to Ellen's room to help pick out a dress. Alex was sprawled out on Ellen's bed, her feet dangling over the edge. She was talking to Ellen as Ellen changed in her closet. Daniel and I were going to go to a movie tonight, but I'll stay home instead, I told Alex, setting the food down on the nightstand. What for? Alex asked, grabbing one of the sandwiches. 'Cause you just broke up with a guy you like, which has made you sad, which, in turn, makes me sad. Alex shook her head at my offer. Thanks, but no thanks. It's not like Davis is my first breakup or anything. My first breakup. Now that was hard. Andy Henderson. He had the best smile, too. Man, you could swim in that smile. You could swim laps around that smile. Laps and laps. That's a visual. I stared at her, doubting she was as gay as she was trying to make me believe. We can watch one of your horrible reality TV shows and binge on Rocky Road. Oh, you do know how to tempt a girl, but I'm fine. Honestly, she said. Swear you are not just being selfless, I commanded, holding up the thumb I had cut to give her my blood, the blood that made us sisters. She touched her thumb to mine. I swear. All right, but when I get back, we are going to talk about it, I said. That sounds so ominous. Oh, I love that one, Ellen. Ellen stepped into the middle of the room and twirled around in a dark blue dress. The dress was beautiful against her pale skin, and smiled. The room brightened with her smile, and some of the negative emotions I had been harboring dropped away. Alex was right. It was perfect. I joined Alex on the bed and felt myself unwind as I joined in on their conversation. It was a feeling that couldn't last. Daniel and I got into the car in silence. His dark mood spoke 1,000 times louder than any words ever could. He had been introverted since our conversation in the kitchen. Introverted was a word Daniel didn't know most days of the week. What's wrong? I asked over the music he had playing. What makes you think something is wrong? He asked. You are showing symptoms of keeping things from me. Minor symptoms include avoiding my eyes. Major symptoms include trying to touch your nose with your eyebrows. His scowl faded, and he laughed. Is there a cure? Truth, I said pointedly. His answer was immediate. I've been in contact with an old friend who seems to think there's a way of finding out what Marcus is planning and why he has spent so many resources in tracking you down. Shouldn't that be a good thing? I asked. Daniel made a face and looked out at the sky. Is that what you were doing these past couple of days? Seeing your friend? I tried again. Can we talk about it later? He asked. Define later, I said. Not now? I can handle not now, I said slowly. Me too, Daniel said. But it's not the end of it, I tacked on. He smiled crookedly in response, knowing I wouldn't give up. We sped to the lonely interstate out of King's Cross, talking about other things then, things that felt real on the surface, but were starting to unravel the further we got from home. Around us, over the blue mountains of my home, dark clouds started to form, a summer storm barreling towards us. I knew it would reach us soon.